Good day. My name is Travis Bembenek, owner and CEO of Mexico News Daily, here with my, I would say, increasingly less confidently wrong friend, George Reavis. Hey, George.
Buenos dias, Travis.
All right. Well, what do you want to talk about today?
Well, today we're going to jump into water. And it's such sort of a big topic. Whether that's water distribution, water supply, water use, quality of water, ice, drinking water. I mean, there's just so many things to talk about when it comes to water in Mexico. So let's sort of dive into that. And I guess one of my questions to you is sort of, why is this topic of water keep coming up all the time in Mexico?
We should start by promising our listeners we're not going to get super wonky. This is not a technical water discussion. It's really just understanding sort of why, as George just said, why is this such an important issue in Mexico versus other countries? It seems like, the joke since I first went to Mexico was, don't drink the water, right? So there's something about Mexico and water that's different. So, one other thing I'd say is I have over 15 years of experience in the water industry in Mexico. So, I'll bring that perspective to this discussion as well. But to start with, Mexico is a unique country in a couple ways. First of all, it has a huge population, over 130 million people, and yet it's a very water scarce country, right? So a lot of the country and a lot of the big cities have monsoon or rainy seasons, and then there's a very long stretch where there's no rain at all, right? So there are real water scarcity issues in the country. The second thing is Mexico has very little surface water. Right, so the easiest water that countries have access to are lakes and rivers, right? And Mexico has very few lakes and rivers. And so what that means is, and that's really number three, is that Mexico needs to go underground, and often deep underground, to access water. When you go deep underground, you start running into problems with the geology that's underground, right? So if you're, I'm from Wisconsin, my family's well went, 10 or 15 feet deep, not a lot of problems with water at that depth. But if you're down 400, 500, 600 feet, you're pulling up heavy metals as well with the water. And so even if it is well water, which we associate in the United States often as being, perfect to drink, in Mexico, because of those heavy metals, it needs a lot of treatment to be usable, either for human consumption or for even industrial use. So Mexico has these sort of three unique things going for it, or going against it, I would say, that make water such an important topic in this country.
Yeah, no, that's all right, surprisingly, Travis.
We're off to an accurate start.
Surprisingly. Let's start with the one thing everybody says: don't drink the water. Let's start with just the tap water issue. Is there any place in Mexico where you feel safe drinking the tap water?
No.
Yeah. I mean,
absolutely not.
I also don't want to give Mexico a bad name. I mean, that is basically any country except for parts of Western Europe, the U.S. and Canada, right? I mean, you just don't drink the tap water, in many, many, many countries all over the world. And, as you said, even though, yes, some of that well water may not be good, but it's because it's coming from so deep. But I think a lot more of it affecting the water is that just the distribution system is in some places just old and rusty and leaky, and that's what actually contaminates the water, even if the actual water supply is good. By the time it goes through the distribution center and gets to your tap, it's not good, right?
Yeah, it's important to just add a little bit more color to that, George. I think so. When I say I would not drink the tap water, it doesn't mean upon drinking tap water in Mexico you get raging diarrhea. That's not the case. But we're used to in Western Europe, US, and Canada, literally never having to fear, or almost never, because there are increasing tap water issues in other countries as well, but never having to think about it, right?
Unless you're in Detroit.
It may be, a 0.1% risk or a 0.01% risk. So, I mean, if you find yourself, without money and severe dehydration, it's not that drinking tap water is going to kill you or immediately make you sick. It's just much higher risk. And then you got into that, a big reason for that much higher risk. And it's the distribution, right? So if you think of a city like Mexico City, 500 years old, constant movement of the ground, and so pipes are breaking constantly.
It's a seismic
clean
zone.
Water, but also like sewage, and so then that can contaminate the distribution network. And so it's not that, again, it's not just that the distribution system is so bad you can't trust it. Mexico City and other parts of the country where there is earthquake type activity, pipes are breaking constantly. And then in other parts of the country, they're just, as often is seen in second and third world nations, the investment isn't there, and quality and consistency in the water treatment and the plants and the piping and everything, just to trust it. And so the reality is most Mexicans who can afford it, so I would say middle class and above, absolutely do not drink the tap water anywhere in the country.
Yeah, it's funny. I certainly don't make a habit of drinking the tap water, but if I wake up in the middle of the night in Mexico City and my mouth is super dry because it's at 7,300 feet and Mexico City's super dry, I'll go into my bathroom all the time, put my mouth under the tap and take a couple sips. I mean, I'm not drinking.
Well, that helps explain some things.
Full glasses.
At least you don't reach into the toilet and, cup your hands and drink it that way.
You also, even if the water is bad, a teeny sip of it isn't going to, mess you up, right? I mean, if you're brushing your teeth, even if the water's gross and you're not swallowing it, that's not going to make you sick, I mean,
I've heard people talk about, cover your mouth and close it, when you're showering.
Ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
I mean, I'll be honest. I do use, bottled water when I brush my teeth. Is that
you shower with bottled water?
I shower with bottled water as well. My wife holds a garrafona above my head. So, I mean, I don't want people to think, well, these guys live there, so they've lowered their guard on this. I'm really quite strict. I don't ever drink tap water. I mean, you said you occasionally do, and I don't even brush my teeth with it. But I do shower with tap water without fear.
I mean, for my house in Sayulita and in Mexico City, we have my house in Sayulita, we have a whole house water filter. But the whole house water filter is just, goes through a UV light, right, to kill all bacteria and living organisms, that sort of stuff. It filters all that out. But what it doesn't filter out are things, like you said, like heavy metals, stuff like that. So while it may not make you sick immediately, long term you might get kidney stones or something from drinking it, right?
Well, let's go there just for a minute, because one of the first choices you're faced with, or decisions you're faced with when you spend time in Mexico, or if you're going to buy a place here, is what are you going to do for water in your home, right? That's sort of one of the first questions you're faced with. And I would say there's really, it kind of, just simplifying it, goes down to 3 different buckets. Well, I would say 4. The first one is you're just going to buy bottled water, right? And when I say bottled water, it's not necessarily little 12 ounce. I mean, they make big ones that are recyclable and things like that. The second one is a filtration unit, which is what you just described. The third one is a RO unit, right? Reverse osmosis unit.
But the reverse osmosis should be lumped into the filter system, sort of.
Well, but they're very different. Actually,
they're very different, but it's just a way to clean your water.
Person would put those together because they're totally different, and I'll just explain why. And then the fourth one is getting your water actually trucked to your house, which sounds crazy, but we'll talk about that later. But just so you have to decide, am I going to just not trust tap water, even if it goes through filters, even if it goes through RO units? And am I going to just buy bottled water, or am I going to trust one of those? And just to, again, not get wonky, but I know a lot of people that just trust filtration units here. And what that does essentially is remove sediments, right? So it removes sediments in the filters, and it removes bacteria, as you said, with the UV light. It does not remove the heavy metals that are so common in most parts of the country. To do that, you need an RO unit. Right? And again, we're not here to get into that in detail, but an RO unit is more expensive, far more effective, but has other problems as well. It lowers the water pressure in your house. It needs constant maintenance and care. Otherwise, you think you're getting, high quality water, and it doesn't. And then the other thing is it actually, if you're going to drink it, it produces water that strangely enough doesn't taste very good. It has like no taste. So again, those are decisions you're faced with. You said in your house, your drinking water
a lot of times it's a combination of that, right? So in Sahuarita, I literally have a combination of almost everything you mentioned. Okay. We have a whole house filter, but it is not an RO unit. It's not reverse osmosis. It's just whatever to kill bacteria. Yeah. But, so you can drink that. But for drinking water, we actually use a foam that we have like next to the fridge, which feeds the ice maker in the fridge, and it feeds, water. So that's what we use, for drinking water. And then, we obviously have cisterns that we are connected to the city water system. But the city water system in Sahuarita runs out of water all the time. So there's probably 6 months during the year where we truck in all of our water, starting in probably January, or actually maybe February through August or September, depending on when the rains come. We're trucking in on pipas trucks, 100% of our water. So we've got city water, we've got filtered water, we've got pipa water, and we've got a phone water, basically all 4 of those things. In Mexico.
Let's go back to the trucking of water, because I would think a lot of people hear that and are just like horrified to imagine that. So I live in San Miguel de Allende. I've lived here for years. I've never, ever once not been able to rely on municipal water. So I've never had to truck water in. So to me, hearing George say that is like totally foreign. And again, I'm not in a super big city or anything. I'm in San Miguel de Allende. If you're in Mexico City, Guadalajara, Monterrey, Querétaro, you're not going to need to worry about trucking your water in.
That's not true. Hold on, Travis. In Mexico City, we're skipping all over the place, but you remember back in 2024, I guess last June or something, was day 0 in Mexico City, right? When Mexico City,
day 0 in quotes,
day 0 when Mexico City was supposed to literally run out of water, run dry. The taps were supposed to run dry. Well, June 26, which was day 0, came and left. But there was a couple months where we did have to get some pipas trucks for our condominium or our apartment in Mexico City to fill the cistern. Not a lot, but we have had to get pipas in Mexico City. And I also think in parts of Estado de Mexico, around Mexico City, I don't think it's that rare for people to have to get pipas. Certainly not like Sahuarita, where half the year you're getting pipas, but I don't think it's that rare.
I stand corrected. I really have heard of extremely few cases. And again, I'm not trying to minimize the water issues of residences in lower income communities, because it's a huge problem.
It's real.
I'm speaking more to our readership, and I have not heard, you're the first time I've heard in a big city of someone actually having to worry about trucking in water. Oaxaca is an area where it's very common as well. So, again, not something you should be like afraid of, like, am I going to run out of water in Mexico in my home? But it's, as we're discussing here, it's something you need to be aware of, and you need to educate yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I'm always looking at real estate, right? And you're looking at lots all the time in like Cabo, and it says water source, and it's always just trucks. So
wow.
Depending on where you are regionally. Some people they truck in every 100% of the water that they use all year round, and that's just considered normal. In Sahuarita, a pipa truck right now is about 10,000 liters, and it costs us about 12 to 1,400 pesos per truck per 10,000 liters. So that's about, 60, $70 for 10,000 liters. And then that 10,000 liters, if we're pretty sort of conservative, or, if we conserve our water usage, we'll go through probably 5 to 6 Pipa's trucks a month. But keep in mind,
Really?
we have 2 little kids. We're constantly doing laundry. We've got a pool. We've got a casita with guests, and guests never conserve the water like you do, because we live here. So yeah, we go through easily 5, 6.
So I mean, it's costing you
month.
$200 a month during that.
More,
that
yeah, it could be
season.
more. I mean, if it's $60, we're in 6 of them. That's $360. So, yeah.
Again, in my case, in San Miguel de Allende, it's just my wife and I, and we don't use a lot of water, really. Our water bill is in the $10 to $20 range per month.
Yeah.
So pretty insignificant, and that's our municipal water bill, right?
Yeah, our municipal water bill, I think it's, 2,500 pesos, maybe $130 for the year. It's super, super cheap. But
you
it
don't
should
get
be.
water
It should
for
be,
half
because
the
half
year.
the time you don't get water, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. They have the nerve to bill you even though your lines are dry.
Exactly. I want to go back to, you mentioned day zero, George.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about that.
That is a sort of a media invented term, right? And again, I'm from the industry. I'm in no way looking to minimize the impact. But day zero was really referring to the fact that the dam system that has reserves of water, surface water reserves of water around Mexico City, were about to dry up. Okay, so day zero was referring to the fact that, after that, the city would no longer be able to pull water from these dams, basically, and water reserves. I'm forgetting the name in English. What are they called?
A reservoir.
Reservoirs, thank you. So they were no longer going to be able to pull them from reservoirs. It didn't mean Mexico City would no longer have water. It meant they'd have to rely exclusively on wells. And again, wells, because they have to go so deep, it's a ton of energy, a ton of treatment, it's just a big headache. And ultimately, they would have had to have started to implement, and they did, some days of the week without water in some neighborhoods. So just to clarify, that day zero is not really referring to the day Mexico City has zero water.
But boy, if you read the articles in the media, that's what they made you think, right?
In non-Mexico News Daily media, yes, we actually ran articles talking about what does day zero mean, because we were seeing it in international papers and basically implying a city of 23 million people was going to run out of water. And it was going to be a Mel Gibson movie or something, where water wars or something, where people were going to start battling it out for water, and that's not the case.
And let's talk about what sort of has changed too since last summer, when June 26th was day zero. Let's talk about just the rains that we've had this rainy season, right? I mean, it's been crazy. I mean, I think there was a stretch in Mexico City. I can't remember if it was June or July or whatever, but it was the rainiest month that Mexico City has had in like 20 years. We talked about it before when the whole airport flooded, and it was nuts, right? So
yeah, it was an exceptionally good rainy season for Mexico City, but for the country as a whole, for most of the country.
Right, most,
so
not
we
all,
actually
but most.
We ran an article just a week or two ago that the reservoir system around Mexico City, which encompasses multiple states, I mean, it's massive, is at 100%. And it hasn't been at 100% in over a decade. And so again, to put that in perspective, it means Mexico City easily has 2 to even perhaps 3 years of water before they would hit the day zero again. And that's if it didn't rain a drop.
Right.
So it was just an exceptionally strong rainy season throughout Mexico City and northwards through the center part of the country. But living here in San Miguel de Allende, which has a relatively dry climate, you're always nervous. I've lived here now 5 rainy seasons, and each one it's nerve-wracking because that everybody relies so much on water here, on rainwater, sort of replenishing things, that I don't think Mexico ever again, unless there's massive climate change for the positive, you just never feel totally comfortable about the water situation here. It's always a little touch and go.
Right. It's funny. I was reading some of the comments in my social medias the other day, and it was a post I had done about Mexico City and how much I love Mexico City, and some guy was like, "Yeah, it's a great city, but with a huge water problem." And I was like, "Well, what water problem? Have you read the news lately? And he was like, "Yeah, it's about to run out of water." I'm like, "That's old news, buddy." And posted some of your articles that I had to send him saying that the reservoirs were at 97 to 100% capacity.
Right.
One thing, Travis, we keep using this word "got a phone," and a lot of people may have no idea what that is. So do you want to sort of explain what a got a phone is and sort of the process of them and
Sure.
how they work?
So if you're going to buy water, not get it trucked in, but actually buy it in bottles, what most people do in the country, and we do this in our office, in our home, and you mentioned in your home, you get these large plastic bottles that I think are like 5 gallons.
5 gallon, yeah.
Yeah, 5 gallons of, filtered, treated water. The equivalent of a little 12-ounce water bottle, but in a 5-gallon option. And so it works great. I mean, obviously a whole industry has sprung up around this. It's the same name brands as your bottled water. They deliver it to you, and they take your old ones and they deliver the new ones.
And it's cheap.
It's cheap. It's, when we say cheap, our Garrafone in our office is something like 50 pesos, I think. So,
Oh, that's expensive. I think ours are cheaper than that. I think ours are 30 to 40 pesos, like $2.
Yeah, but the guy filled it up at his home or something with a hose, right? Ours is high quality. Ours is about $3, and it lasts our office a day or two, right? So I mean, we're spending a dollar or two a day on water delivered to us in these big plastic containers. I think it's important. You can get them from grocery stores or from Oxxos, or you can get them delivered to you, as I said. But there's another option where in little neighborhoods, often you'll see these little businesses, and sometimes they're almost like vending machines where you put your Garrafone in there and you put in the money, and it gives you, water. Now those ones, I think you have to be a little more careful of, because
Definitely.
you don't know
Definitely.
what the water treatment is behind that vending machine.
Yeah, not only those, Travis, but there are a lot of sort of just little kind of tiendas that will process their own water and put it in the Garrafones. And I always tell people, don't use those. Get a branded Garrafone from, whatever, like Ciel or, there's a bunch. Yeah, Bonafont. There's a ton of different companies. But I would not just go into some random little tienda and buy one of those Garrafones where you don't know where the water is coming from. I read a study several years ago, and I don't want to scare people, but, several years ago where they did test a bunch of those Garrafones in and around Mexico City, and 50% of the Garrafone water that they tested was, didn't meet drinking standards, so, people just need to be smart about it, right? Just because something is in a bottle does not mean that it is necessarily safe,
and again, if in your neighborhood, if all of a sudden there's this little store that appears of George Reavis's water company, you don't know if he's using water filters, reverse osmosis. You don't
tap
know
water.
if he's properly maintaining it. Tap water, you just don't know. And so I'm not trying to badmouth those little businesses, but it's higher risk. Many people use them,
Totally.
And it's fine, but it's higher risk than buying Garrafones, as George said, of a name brand from a store or from a delivery guy that brings it to you.
Totally. Travis, let's talk a little bit. We're talking about how there is somewhat of a scarcity of water in Mexico, even though the reservoirs are full right now. But what is the water being used for? Like, what's the breakout of the water? Is it industry? Is it agriculture? Is it residential use? What is it?
That's a great question, because I hear so many confidently wrong comments from people about water in Mexico in that area. And let me give you two examples. So one is around San Miguel de Allende. Whenever a new little housing development pops up, I hear people saying, "Oh my God, not more houses, and as it is, we have water scarcity in this area," right? So a lot of people are really concerned anytime new homes are built, because they associate that with water usage. The second thing is for example, Los Cabos, basically desert. Whenever a new golf course is announced, people say, "Oh my God, the absurdity of this all, of having a golf course in the middle of a desert, it's crazy. People can't get enough water as it is," right? So those are sort of two big, confidently wrong buckets of water concern, and I'm going to explain why. So to step back, incredibly, almost 3/4 of the water used in the country are used for agricultural purposes. So imagine that for a minute. Think of all the residences of 132 million people in the country, all the industry you see throughout the country, and yet it's agriculture that uses 75% of the water. Okay? Industry uses about 10%. Residential use is about 15%.
Industry, what? Like
when I say industry, I mean literally everything. So
right.
Paper production, steel mills, auto plants, Coca-Cola bottling plants, really anything that's made in all of these industrial parks throughout Mexico uses a lot of water in their systems. And I say, I'm going to correct myself. They use a lot of water, but and again, where I worked, I've literally been in hundreds of industrial plants in Mexico, and they have a incredible amount of recycling and reuse of water in their plants. So in general terms, Mexican plants of multinationals tend to have some of the most investment in water reuse and water recycle of any of their plants in the world. Oftentimes when they try new technologies to recycle and reuse, they do it in a Mexican plant. So industry, again, 10%, and they spend a ton of money to reuse and recycle their water. So I wouldn't say that's, of course it's a concern because they use it, but given their practices, especially of multinationals, not a huge concern. Residential, again, 15%. And if you look at the footprint of water usage of an average home in Mexico versus an average home in the U.S., it's night and day. So the average home in Mexico doesn't use much water, actually. They have usually less bathrooms. They don't use
they don't take water for granted, right? I mean, in the States, you take water for granted. You turn on the tap, you don't think about it. Right? Whereas here, we're always thinking about it. I certainly am in Sayulita and in Mexico City. You're always thinking about your water consumption, which is kind of a good thing, right?
It is. I mentioned golf courses, and most golf courses in the country actually use recycled wastewater. So it's not like they're taking water, and of course there's some exceptions, but these golf courses in Los Cabos, they're not taking water from, pristine water from a well or something and using it for the golf course. What they're often and almost always doing is taking water that has been used by industry or residences, is wastewater. And they are making it, they're cleaning it up and treating it and then reusing it for golf course use. So again, that's an area that's really misunderstood as well.
So just to go back over those numbers, so 75% agriculture, 10% industry, and 15% basically residential use.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
I mean it's eye-opening, and so much concern is around, as I said, a new house being built or a new factory being built or a golf course. But the real focus and of course there needs to be emphasis in those areas, right? With water, it has to be, especially in a country like Mexico, an every solution type answer, right? I mean, everyone has to do their part given the water issues here. But it's really agriculture where, as we said, the vast majority of the water is used. And what I tell people is, what should concern you is when you're driving out in the countryside here and you see only cacti, and then all of a sudden you see an alfalfa field, right? Or you see a corn field, essentially in a desert, or a very dry area. That's what's using the water. The water, but so what do, right? Because you can't tell farmers or people who actually grow their own food to not use water, right?
Well, you could. It might not go over so well.
Yeah, it's not very politically popular. And so that's why agriculture tends to go somewhat untouched, because it's politically very unpopular to, clamp down on water, with farmers and people that, that rely on water to grow food. So what is happening in Mexico, and it's really quite fascinating, if you drive around in the center part of the country, there is a massive greenhouse industry popping up. So one way you can make agriculture much less water intensive is through greenhouses and through things like drip irrigation, right? So instead of just flooding a field with water or having a sprinkler system in the middle of the day in the hot sun, you have water just dripping at the roots of the plant. And that's becoming, very, very, very big industry in Mexico. For the domestic food production, but for export also.
I'm sort of surprised. I'm just thinking back to what you said. I'm sort of surprised that you've never had any issues in San Miguel with water shortages or had to use pipas. And I'm surprised because I remember we were in Querétaro probably 2 or 3 years ago, and which isn't very far from San Miguel, right? What's an hour,
right.
something
45
away?
minutes,
yeah.
yeah.
Super close. And we were in the historic sort of town center square, yeah. And there were a bunch of people protesting, not yelling, screaming, whatever, but just sort of camping out and protesting their lack of water. And I was like, wow, I was talking to the waiter or something, and I was like, are they here all the time? He's like, they've been here for like a couple months, like just basically camped out, complaining about their lack of water. So,
it's a hyper-local issue, right? I mean, I live in my address is Centro, so I am in the central part of San Miguel de Allende. I'm very aware of the fact that, a mile away, there's water issues, right?
Oh, okay.
Either the municipality isn't shipping it, or the truck shipments aren't occurring as frequently. So I'm just speaking on my own personal experience.
Okay.
But,
No, that makes more sense. Yeah, I thought you meant just all of San Miguel. There's never water problems, and that was a little bit shocking to me.
No,
but you're basically talking about Centra.
Yeah, and I mean, I go outside of town, often to visit friends, or I go swimming outside of town, and I see water trucks every day delivering, because they're not on the municipal grid, and so typical residents can't have a 600-foot well.
Right.
I mean, just the electricity costs of pumping water makes it prohibitive.
Well,
so
and
what
the
do?
installation
They get water
costs,
delivery.
those things they're expensive as shit, putting in a well.
Yeah, and so ultimately they rely on truck delivery, right? Everywhere outside of town. So again,
my neighbor behind me put one in last year, and I think he had to go down, 300 plus feet, maybe 300, 350 feet. And, I think that well was $30,000 or $40,000, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like, that's out of the means of, out of the realm of possibility for most people to be able to drill that expensive of a well, right?
Sure, for sure. And again, and then just that electricity cost of constantly running a pump is quite high. So, but like I said, greenhouses are a good trend, a very good trend to reduce water use per crop. One thing that's not helping is, as Mexico's gotten better at this greenhouse industry, companies in the United States are moving more and more of their food production to Mexico. So imagine, maybe raspberries and blueberries used to come from Michigan and Wisconsin, and now those companies many times have found it cheaper to just have them produced in Mexico in a greenhouse. And so you have, water-rich areas around the Great Lakes that can make, grow fruit, and it's just easier and cheaper to move that to a greenhouse in the middle of a desert in Mexico. It's kind of a weird dynamic that's happening, but it is a big trend. I mean, we report a lot on how the agriculture export industry is booming in Mexico throughout the country.
Interesting. What else? We've sort of covered most of it. Is there anything else?
Yeah, I think it's so people have to say, well, what do I do? I mean, what can I do? How can I be part of the solution, not part of the problem? And I think, at the very micro level of your home or where you're staying, there's things you can do, and it's very common here in construction to incorporate water recycling into projects, right? So homes will have individual, water catchment systems for when it rains. I live in a little neighborhood with several homes, and actually all the water that falls on our roofs and in our parking area is ultimately captured underground in a huge cistern, and that is used to water all the plants, right? So it's a recycling system. So you can either put those into places if you're building a place, or you can look for those types of things if you're looking for a place, because they are quite common. The other thing you can do is support local charities in your neighborhood. I mean, even if you personally may not have a water problem in your home in Mexico, you can be pretty much guaranteed people all around you do. And it's oftentimes, rural families right outside of town that really struggle with water. And so there's charities that do good work to help those communities have access to water. So I think that's something you can do and just be aware of. If you're here and you don't have a problem, it doesn't mean others don't. And I think, as far as industry, industry tends to be, people lament the fact of a new factory coming in, oftentimes because of water. But I, based on my own personal experience of many years, I don't think that's something people should be concerned about. Data centers is a whole nother thing, right?
Totally.
Everyone knows data centers are a massive user of water today. They're finding ways to reduce water all the time. But as Mexico's needs for data centers increases, that's going to put a strain on water as well. So there's just a lot going on. We actually ran an article either yesterday or the day before. Mexico's Senate is actually debating this issue of individual rights to water, right? So it's a real issue in this country where a lot of people don't even have access to water, and the government is trying to figure out ways to legislate that to enable more investment to take place.
Well, and those rights have often been sold in the past with, what some would say sort of shady dealings too, right?
Yeah, that's something interesting, George, because, if a company, let's say a company, and I don't want to pick on any company, but let's just say a beer company is wanting to build a plant, right? And actually that was a real example in the United States, in Mexico, near the US border. A company wanted to build a bottling plant of beer that would be for export. And again, you're thinking they're taking Mexican water, turning it into beer and exporting it in a desert, right? And so that project got shut down. But you have this other weird dynamic where people will, and I won't pick on the beer industry. Let's say you're in the construction industry and you buy a plot of land. You have the rights to the water under your land. And what oftentimes has happened is if you're in the construction business, you say, wait a minute, I can make more money just selling water. And so, you start using your land and the well on it to start filling trucks with water and distributing water.
Well,
And that's good for
interesting,
you, but then the
because-
community around you, the water table goes down.
Right.
So-
That's interesting because here where we live, yeah, you have those rights, but you can't just go and drill a well. You've got to go and get all the permits, get the environmental permits, get the well permit. It's not just, I'm going to put in a well and take whatever I want. No. I mean, there are illegal wells everywhere.
Yeah,
but,
I was going to say.
Right. But to do it legally, you do have to permit it. It's not just, it's yours. Right.
Yeah, you also have this legacy thing where when you do get an approval, and I'm not an expert in this area, but you basically have it forever. And so you had companies, in Mexico City that got a permit for a well, 80 years ago based on a certain amount of production and whatever. And now here 80 years later, they're making a fortune by, getting into the water business. And affecting the water table and everything. So there's been a lot of, you could say abuses, or you could say, entrepreneurial people, taking advantage of the opportunity. And Shane Baum's administration is trying to take steps to fix some of these issues. Again, water is a very touchy issue, but we cover it. We actually on our site have a separate section called Water in Mexico, because there's so much going on, and there's just so much.
It's a great section. I read it all the time. I love it. We've talked a ton about water, but let's talk about a form of water which I get asked about all the time, which is ice. What's your opinion on ice? Do you drink ice in your glass at a restaurant? Are you concerned about ice in your cup? Give me your take. I know I've got a pretty strong opinion on it. What do you think?
Well, if you remember, I very quickly said I do not trust tap water. I will just as quickly say I 100% trust ice, right?
Do trust ice. 100% do trust it.
100% have no problem with ice. I think the Mexico of 30 years ago, there was always but you can't trust the source of the ice, and you don't know how they made the ice. The ice industry is alive and well in Mexico now, and they're going to get bagged ice the same way they're going to get a garrafon, from a reputable source, and you can absolutely trust ice.
Yeah, I mean that's my opinion too. It's either they're buying bagged ice, or if they're making ice, they're making it from garrafon water, right?
Yes.
So, I don't have an issue with it either, but. If you suspect that they're not making it from garrafon water or from buying bags of ice, then maybe be sketched out about it. But in general, I'm just not worried about it at all.
What I often tell people is, if they were serving you bad ice, they are potentially risking getting every person in the restaurant sick. Totally. And they themselves wouldn't drink bad ice or use bad ice. So it's not happening. They're not going to do it.
Right, totally. Sort of on that note, a lot of people too, when it comes to like lettuce or washing fruits or whatever, are nervous. They're like, the fruit is fine, but you've got to be so careful because the water that they wash the fruit in is going to get you sick, which I think is bullshit. But, what's your take on that?
Well, again, I already said I'm a bit on the probably more concerned than I should be spectrum, because I actually use a little bottled water for brushing my teeth. So when it comes to, bagged lettuce at a grocery store that you buy in a bag, of course I don't wash that, right? That has gone through a perfectly fine water treatment system. But fruit that I buy, so fresh raspberries, fresh blueberries, fresh strawberries, I put them in, and this is probably overkill, but this is what I do. I put them in bottled water, in bowls, and then I put in bottled water, and then I put a few of those iodine drops for a couple minutes. It just, when you first move to Mexico, it's weird. Once you've been here a while, it's just second nature. You put a couple drops in, let it sit for a couple minutes, drain the water, and it's good to go. And we always do that on our fruits and vegetables. When I boil water to make pasta, I just take tap water because I'm boiling the water.
Yeah, so totally.
What about you with fruits? Do you
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly rinse them off. I don't use iodine drops. One thing on that note, a friend of mine got really sick because he didn't properly wash eggs that he was using. And unlike in, the States where you'll get
I don't wash eggs.
But you'll in the States, you get eggs in the carton, whatever, they've been washed 10,000 times. A lot of times here in the little tiendas, you're getting a bag of eggs and you might visibly see like chicken shit or like feathers stuck to the eggs. You know what I mean? And he didn't clean it and he got super sick from, probably chicken poo being on his eggs. So, I wash my eggs.
Yeah, I've never heard of a story like that. But yeah, so I guess a takeaway for our listeners here is if you see chicken poop on your egg, wash it.
Don't eat it.
Right? Don't eat it. That's a good one. Good insight. So I think, again, it probably isn't necessary to do the whole bottled water washing and iodine of fruit from a grocery store. Probably just tap water even is fine on that. But again, I err on the side of probably more caution than I need to. I think that, the takeaway as someone who's looking to spend time or living in Mexico is, it's not like it is back home in the U.S. or Canada. You really do have to, be much more informed, talk to neighbors, friends, read, be aware of what's going on because it's changing also. And this has to be on your radar screen, right? It's not something you just don't have to think about. It has to be on your radar screen if you're going to live in Mexico.
Yeah, and if you're not paying attention, what you just said is totally right. It's changing all the time, right? I mean, from last summer was supposedly day zero, and this summer the reservoirs are at 100% capacity. So if you're not paying attention, shit can change quickly, and you won't be in the know, and it's important to be in the know.
Exactly. Well said. Well, good. Anything else you want to add, George?
No, I've enjoyed it, and I hope people sort of got a lot out of it because it's a big thing to sort of unpack the whole, water issue from, we've talked about a lot of stuff. So, it's just an interesting topic, and as always, I've enjoyed chatting about it.
Yep, good discussion. Thank you. Until next time.
Thanks, Travis.
Take care.